On Sunday, everything happened away from the cameras and photographers who usually surround any movement related to the Trump family. While the public believed the weekend would be just another silent chapter in the legal disputes involving Donald Trump, a discreet move began in Washington and completely changed the course of history. Melania Trump entered a federal building without drawing attention, without the presence of Donald Trump's lawyers, and without any official announcement. It wasn't a public summons, it wasn't a televised hearing, and it wasn't a simple formality. According to the classified documents revealed that morning, she voluntarily decided to cooperate with federal prosecutors linked to a task force that hadn't even been announced to the public until then. The most frightening detail is that this meeting remained hidden for hours while internal decisions silently shook the legal core of the Trump organization. The information recorded in the court documents describes a sequence of events that, according to investigators, could completely redefine the federal case. The document has 41 pages and, in one of the most sensitive sections, prosecutors specifically question Melania about financial transactions authorized directly by her weeks before the freezing of accounts linked to the Trump organization. What is striking is not only the value of the transfers, but the exact timing of everything. According to records, approximately $18 million was transferred to companies registered outside the United States shortly before federal authorities initiated financial freeze measures. The timeline is detailed in spreadsheets, bank records, and signed authorizations. Investigators state that the interval between internal alerts and transfers was extremely short, raising suspicions about a possible attempt to protect assets before the lawsuits became public. The silence surrounding the task force also increased tensions. These were not the same prosecutors involved in the more well-known New York cases. It was a separate group from the Department of Justice, operating discreetly for weeks and working in parallel with other federal investigations. While the media spotlight was on previous cases, this group quietly advanced, analyzing financial documents, internal communications, and records of international companies connected to the Trump family. What made the situation even more explosive was the fact that Melania participated in the meeting without a joint legal defense agreement with Donald Trump's lawyers. This meant she was acting separately from the official defense strategy built by the former president's team. Investigators considered this decision extremely relevant. Under U.S. federal law, there is a huge difference between someone being merely the spouse of an investigated party and someone officially acting as an authorizing officer for financial transactions. According to the documents, her name appeared as a signatory on several business records linked to the analyzed transfers. And for federal investigators, signatures matter as much as direct orders. The document describes that the investigation began to gain momentum months earlier, when the Department of Justice expanded its analysis beyond issues involving classified documents found at Mar-a-Lago. The new line of investigation began to examine family financial structures, international assets, and transactions carried out shortly before possible federal sanctions. At that point, the first internal warnings emerged. Financial advisors linked to the Trump organization reportedly sent messages recommending asset reorganization and repositioning in light of the possibility of severe federal measures. The report indicates that these warnings occurred at the end of February. A few days later, the international transfers began. Prosecutors identified 3 shell companies registered in different countries and noted that these same entities had previously been mentioned in investigations related to money laundering and high-risk financial structures. This connected 2 distinct investigations and dramatically increased the Justice Department's interest in the case. What previously seemed like just a legal dispute involving assets began to be treated as a possible coordinated operation to move funds before federal action. The document pages describe internal emails exchanged within the Trump organization. In these messages, consultants discussed financial strategies in the face of possible court-ordered asset freezes. According to the records, Melania allegedly received several of these warnings directly. Investigators highlighted specific numbers to reinforce the identified pattern. 6 consultants exchanged messages approximately 72 hours before the transfers began. After that, the financial transactions happened rapidly. Prosecutors interpreted the sequence as possible evidence of prior knowledge of imminent federal actions. Every detail of the chronology became a central piece of the investigation. The narrative constructed by the investigators was no longer limited to Donald Trump's actions. For the first time, the focus clearly expanded to people around him who had participated in critical financial decisions. When Melania entered that federal building in Washington, investigators already possessed months of cross-reference documents, bank records, electronic authorizations, and internal communications. The meeting didn't happen by chance. According to the records themselves, it was the task force that directly requested the meeting. This completely changed the interpretation of the case. She wasn't called merely as a distant witness. Prosecutors wanted specific answers about dates, authorizations, and prior knowledge of the financial transactions. The most impressive thing was the duration of the conversation, 4 hours and 22 minutes. This wasn't a quick meeting. This wasn't a bureaucratic formality. Sessions of this size typically involve detailed document analysis, confirmation of timelines, and comparison of financial records. While this was happening, Donald Trump was at Mar-a-Lago without direct participation in the meeting. Later information indicated that the former president's main legal team was only informed hours after the meeting ended. The reaction within the defense circle was immediate. Shortly after the first notifications, internal movements marked by tension, emergency meetings, and strategic discussions began. Then came the resignations. 3 important members of the legal team officially left the defense, citing irreconcilable strategic differences. The speed of these departures caught the attention of political and legal observers. The atmosphere within Trump's defense began to be described as chaotic. At the same time that the press publicly discussed Trump's explosive reactions on social media, another silent movement was taking place in the federal courts. Prosecutors filed additional requests demanding full access to Melania's personal financial records spanning several years. It was no longer an investigation limited to specific transactions. Now, investigators wanted to examine the entire financial structure linked to her name since 2019. This included bank accounts, businesses, international transfers, investments, and asset records. Simultaneously, the U.S. Attorney's Office filed requests to keep all proceedings related to Melania under absolute secrecy. This detail provoked intense speculation among legal analysts. In federal investigations, extreme secrecy measures usually indicate 2 main possibilities. Either the person is actively cooperating with investigators, or prosecutors are protecting an extremely sensitive case that could still result in future formal charges. The political atmosphere in Washington changed rapidly after this information leaked. Close aides began to avoid public comment. Doors closed within the Trump organization. People who previously spoke freely began to communicate only through lawyers. The feeling was that something much bigger was happening behind the scenes. Federal investigators continued to move forward silently, while the public was still trying to understand the magnitude of Melania's secret meeting. The court document also described logistical details of her arrival at the federal building. No press conference was authorized. No group of journalists was notified beforehand. The chosen building was not the main Justice Department headquarters, but a secondary facility used precisely for discreet meetings. The choice of location indicated a clear intention to avoid public exposure. The lawyer who accompanied Melania was not part of Donald Trump's main defense team. He was a personal representative hired independently years earlier. This detail further increased suspicions about a possible strategic split within the Trump family itself. The more details emerged, the more experts realized the case was becoming unpredictable. Investigators seemed to be working on multiple fronts simultaneously. While one team analyzed international financial transactions, another examined internal communications of the Trump organization. And now a third line of investigation specifically looked at Melania's role in bank authorizations and asset decisions. What began as the secret meeting began to be treated in political circles as a possible breaking point within the former president's defense structure. Federal analysts stated that the chronology was too important to ignore. First came the internal warnings, then the international transfers, next the freezing of accounts, and finally, Melania's silent cooperation with federal prosecutors. Each step seemed connected to the previous, one almost perfectly. The dates coincided with frightening precision. The interval between the internal warnings and the financial transfers was too short to seem random. And the time between the freezing of accounts and the secret meeting also seemed carefully calculated. Investigators believed that each decision made during this period could reveal prior knowledge of federal actions. The Department of Justice maintained absolute public silence while this was happening. No official press conference was held. No spokesperson confirmed details. But court records continued to discreetly surface in federal systems. And each new document further amplified the political tension surrounding the case. People close to the investigation stated that the task force had been working quietly for weeks precisely to avoid leaks. The goal was to gather enough information before any public move alerted strategic stakeholders. When Melania agreed to meet with prosecutors without coordination with Trump's team, it completely changed the dynamics of the case. For the first time, the possibility of conflicting interests within the former president's own family circle emerged. While political allies tried to downplay the situation publicly, investigators continued to expand judicial requests and deepen their analysis of international documents. The coming weeks were seen as crucial. The federal grand jury was about to reconvene. New hearings could occur at any moment, and the task force remained protected by extreme layers of secrecy. Fear within the Trump organization grew with each new leak. Longtime employees began seeking their own legal counsel. Former financial advisors began reviewing old contracts and records. Some political allies even avoided mentioning the case in public interviews. The general feeling was that something much bigger than a traditional legal dispute was unfolding behind the scenes at the federal level. The documents described not only financial transactions, but a possible pattern of decisions made with prior knowledge of imminent government actions. This completely transformed the weight of the accusations being analyzed. And the more details emerged, the harder it became for observers to ignore the gravity of the situation. The secret meeting, lasting 4 hours and 22 minutes, ceased to be merely a political curiosity. It became the center of a federal investigation that now seemed to directly target the financial core of the Trump family.